This is not a video how to pop and swap. If you want to know the basics of popping and swapping, check out one of my older kit bash videos before watching this one. But basically, Mythic Legions are modular figures. It is a feature of the line to be able to pop them apart and then put them back together without any permanent modification. Let's say you have a green knight with silver armor, but you'd rather have that armor be gold. You could, with relative ease, swap out those silver parts on the Xylernian guard for the gold parts from the gold knight, for example. In fact, some figures come with extra parts and you can get right into popping and swapping with just a single figure. A few figures come with an extra torso, some with extra arms, and many of them have extra heads and hands. And in this video, I'd like to discuss what I think are the best figures for popping and swapping. Admittedly, some of these figures have been sold out for years, so don't necessarily take this as a shopping list. More so, this should be seen as a primer on what it takes to be a good pop and swap figure. So I decided to separate this list into 3 categories. And before we start, I also want to point out that every single figure on this list is a Mythic Legions 1.0 figure. I didn't put ogres, I didn't put brutes, I didn't put 2.0 figures, I didn't put any other sized figures because, in my opinion, the best figures for kit bashing are the 1.0 figures. It's got the biggest library of parts. It's the easiest to pop apart and back together. Those 2.0 figures can be a challenge. That's like, maybe I'll do like part 2 video and talk about 2.0 figures. But for now, I'm just kind of keeping it simple with all 1.0 figures. So everything on this list that I say is compatible with each other. And starting off with the beginner list, I do want to point out that there are 5 figures in each one, and this isn't any sort of ranking. I'm just saying these are 5 figures that I would recommend for beginners, or that I think, beginners should look at as great examples of pop and swap figures if you're just like going to have one figure. If you only owned one figure, then these are the ones I'd recommend. And I'm clustering the first 3 of the beginner figures together. It's the Deluxe Barbarian Builder Set, the Deluxe Knight Builder Set, and the Deluxe Male Orc Builder Set, all the 1.0 version of figures. And these are like just packs that are loaded with stuff. Tons of weapons, tons of armor bits, tons of different swap out parts. I mean, the Knight, which is actually the hardest one to find. I wouldn't recommend seeking that one, but you never know. They might do another type of knight like this, and it's just kind of good to be aware of the type of thing here. But the knight actually has a torso that you can swap out. I believe the Deluxe Orc has a torso you can swap out as well. So those 3, to me, are like the ultimate in just, if you were to buy one Mythic Legions figure and just only own one, that's what I would recommend. In fact, the Knight was my very first figure, and at one point that was the only figure I owned, and I still had a lot of fun just mixing and matching within that figure. So those are the first 3 of the beginner 5. And then I have 2 more that are standard Mythic Legions 1.0 style figures. One of them is the Praetorian/Uit figure, and don't let the name fool you. It is just one figure, but you can configure it into 2 different figures. So you can either go as a Minotaur or as a Fury Orc. So you have those 2 very different looks. It'll get you popping and swapping feet. It'll get you popping and swapping heads. It'll get you mixing and matching armor parts. There's just a lot of fun. To me, that is probably like a top 3 in terms of like in the box value for 1.0 figures. And then the second one is the Valiant Knight. And I know that that one went up for sale and sold out pretty quickly and is still hard to find. But at some point, I think the Valiant Knight will just be aftermarket, like pretty easy. It's not going to be a long-term, very special figure. It's just special now because of its newness. And the Valiant Knight has multiple heads. It has a whole bunch of hands. So this is a really good example of a figure with a bunch of different hands for popping and swapping, for like very subtle different gestures and things like that. Lots of weapons. And it is just a fun figure to mix and match. It's also a great one that could be on the intermediate list. Really, any of these could also be on the intermediate list in terms of like, they are awesome for mixing and matching with other figures, but they are the best. They are the absolute best, in my opinion, for standalone, just one box, one product, one package, enough to actually have fun mixing and matching and making your character unique to your own. Next up is the intermediate category, and these are figures that have typically like really good colors and lots of parts, and just really great for mixing and matching with other figures. They might not necessarily have a ton of crazy options within their own package, but like put together, a Xylernian guard with, like I said, a gold knight, for example, and you have gold. You have like some amazing options there. And this is Sir Gerard. One of the reasons Sir Gerard isn't amazing for mixing and matching is because that character itself is a shapeshifter. So it's actually built into the design and the lore of that figure to be a pop and swap character. So mixing heads in there. The armor is a great neutral color for just doing any sort of mixing and matching, like upgrade armors on some of the other figures. And yeah, it's just a really, really good figure with multiple heads, a lot of good options, and still fairly accessible. Like it's not like some figures where they're like over $100. I think Sir Gerard is still relatively accessible. And then we have one of the newest figures, and that is Lige of the Elite Elven Guard. Check out my review on that figure if you want to see some Lige pop and swaps in action, but he's got that gold armor that is just wonderful for mixing and matching. He comes with extra unarmored black limbs, goes great with the Jagualian cat head from the heads pack, like just an awesome figure. And like I said, great colors. It matches with the Gold Knight, Attila, Magnus, like tons of just great figures for mixing and matching with Lige. And then next up is the Xylernian Guard, which hits on a few different levels. One, it's got silver armor that is hyper detailed in a super rich, deep color with lots of paint applications. So those armored parts, you can sort of like upgrade any character you want. Like let's say you have a basic army builder, like let's say you have the Temple Relic Guard. That's one of the more recent reinforcement figures, and you just want to like upgrade that kind of figure and have that Templar type look with the upgraded armor. Xylernian Guard, arms, legs, helmet, like boom, and you have a sick upgraded figure. It's also going to get you popping and swapping cloth goods. I think it's the only one so far on the list that comes with cloth goods. So that has an option to use either the cloth tabard-like loincloth or the plastic tabard-like loincloth. And so you have an extra part there that you could take, pop it onto some other figure. So a really good option there. Xylernian Guard comes with a lot of parts. Speaking of figures that mix well with the Xylernian Guard, take the Xylernian Guard arms and legs and put them on Vorthog, which is my next pick. And Vorthog has that torso. It's got great orc parts. It's got multiple orc heads. It's got swap out feet, whether you want armored or bare. A lot of great options for pushing other figures into like certain directions. One of my favorite things is to take that Vorthog chest and just make it like a fully armored knight. Use the Xylernian Guard arms and legs, or maybe the arms and legs from the Temple Relic Guard, or just a regular Templar. Vorthog is one of those figures that will always be handy to have an extra one in a collection. He's obviously a little bit harder to find right now, so maybe he'll get a reissue or something down the road. But yeah, like I love having an extra Vorthog. I keep one basically unassembled just to have for parts for mixing and matching. And then the last of the intermediates is the Pelvicus Lord Bashadi, which brings some really good red parts. I almost wanted to put this in the advanced, but it is so kind of universal in the terms of like what you can do with this figure, because there are a lot of red and black type characters, but there are not a lot of red and black characters that have those glossy red arms. In fact, those are super unique to this figure. So you have that aspect of it. Again, this is kind of like one of the beginners where like you can do a lot of mixing and matching because it's two characters in one package, but there's some great parts on here. I love that torso for swaps. I love the gray, the kind of like weathered gray armor that it comes with. Just a lot of good options with the Pelvicus Lord Bashadi figure in terms of swapping with other figures. And finally, we have the advanced category. And this is like, I would recommend anything that I've listed previously. I would say if you have access to it, grab it no matter what. Throw it in your collection. Even if you're never going to display it, it's just great to have that figure as parts or, any opportunity for mixing and matching. It's just going to come in handy. These next ones, I would say, don't necessarily buy them just for mixing and matching. Like, don't just put them in reserve and be like, oh yeah, that'll be great fodder for mixing and matching with, in stock figures or whatever. These are more so specialty kit bashing, which is why I'm kind of air quotes calling it the advanced situation. Maybe they have like a really interesting head, or maybe there's a super rare colorway of a certain part, or even just a super rare part in general that's great for combining with other things. And I'm starting off with one that really surprised me after I got it in hand, and I use it quite a lot for kit bashing. I was almost tempted to put this on the intermediate, but the applications are somewhat limited, and that is Sir Owain, the knight that has like a very toned down, it's not even silver armor. It's basically like a flat gray armor, and then it has some golds and blacks mixed in. And you might think, well, what am I going to mix that with? Most figures have a shiny silver armor, or most figures have this or that. But one example of Owain is taking any black parts from any other figures and putting it on that Sir Owain. For example, I took the flesh body parts from the Krampus figure and mixed it up with Sir Owain, and it just blew me away how good it looked. And when I posted it to the community, I was just like floored with how many people loved that look. So Sir Owain is really interesting for part swaps. It's also got that gold. So mixing Sir Owain with the Gold Knight is really interesting. You could also mix it with, of course, Lige and the other figures that have gold. So there's a lot of really interesting options with Sir Owain, but like very specific kinds of applications. One figure that has a unique color on a very popular body part for kit bashing is Xenothon, and I believe it is the only figure with gray flesh body parts, and it's got the full set. It's got the gray arms, both arms, the torso, and the upper legs. So you definitely have some really cool options to mix Xenothon with other figures. That's the main thing there. Of course, Xenothon does come with some wings and stuff, so if you want to start messing around with wings, that's a great option as well. Next up is Calavius, and this is also a similar situation as Xenothon, where Calavius has that dark brown skin. There are dark skin characters, but there aren't any other ones that have the torso and Calavius only does have the one arm there, but it is a fantastic figure for making new looks, right? Like for just taking some other figure and just absolutely transforming it into a different color. So it is a really good figure for that. Calavius is also, I believe, the only figure with the gold Gorgo style helmet, and I know there's some browns in there too, but if you want to put that helmet with like the gold antlers or some wings on there, like with one of your gold figures, Calavius is the place to be. It's a great helmet to have for that. Another character that has super rich parts, like color rich, is Bardrick. Lord Bardrick is probably still my all-time favorite Mythic Legions figure. It just has so many cool parts on there. That torso is still pretty rare. There's only, I think, one or two other figures with that torso. And taking that torso and that skirt piece and just mixing it with different armor colors and putting, like, for example, the Xylernian Guard armor with that figure is amazing. There's just a lot of great options to take that leather look and then put it on another figure, because there's just not a lot of leather going on in 1.0 Legions. And finally, some people might call him the king of pop and swaps because his head has been swapped probably more than any other head. We do have Magnus, and Magnus could probably also go in the intermediate because he does have those golds, but this is really all about that head sculpt. If you want to make a Cosmic Legions human, right? That head is perfect. If you want to make any kind of character a human or have a human head, Magnus's head sculpt is amazing. It works on so many different figures. It works on almost any figure. You could pop the head on pretty much any figure, and it is an absolute champion. But again, that is a very specific usage. For the most part, Magnus is Magnus, and the other applications for it could pretty much be accomplished with the Gold Knight, mostly to head-to-toe gold armor. So that's my list. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know what you think are your favorite beginner, intermediate, and advanced pop and swap options in the comments below. And until next time, may the force be with you.